Welcome to Dr. Bingo Fairmont's Management Minute. I am Russell Clayton. Today, Dr. Fairmont is showing his prize bull at the Florida State Fair. So since he can't be here, it's going to be me and Shu here to represent. Today, Shu is going to give us 35 minutes of some poetry that he wrote last night. Isn't that what we're doing today, Shu?
I'm not sure that's what we are doing, Russell. But speaking of the fair, did you get a chance to go to the fair? Are you a fair guy?
I am a fair guy,
Yeah.
but I haven't made it to the Florida State Fair since we've been here.
Wow. So how many years has that been?
4.
4 years.
I'm missing out.
So, well, do you like the fair in general? You like the spinny rides and
What I
the
love,
Sickinator and the throw up machine and all this?
I'm not a big fan of puking, but I do love the fair food.
Yes, that is good stuff. What's the best fried fair food you've ever had?
I think we share a mutual love for the fried Oreo.
Fried Oreo, fried Twinkie, also
Yeah,
good.
yeah. But you can't go wrong with just your basic funnel cake.
That's for sure. Now I'll just have some powdered sugar on there. Some people like the syrup and the strawberries and all that, but no.
Yeah, I'm kind of a purist like yourself. I like the funnel cake and the powdered sugar.
Yes. Well, are you any good at all those games where you can win pay $5 to win a $1 prize?
Yeah, I'm not so good at that. That may be the reason I avoid the fairs, because I know the little ones are going to tug on the shirt and say, Daddy, win me a bear.
It looks so easy, Daddy.
It does.
Yep.
I think it's rigged.
You may be right.
I think it's rigged.
For sure. Well, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to piggyback off of an earlier episode where you shared some information with us. We're going to talk about wrongful discharge.
Oh, yeah.
And, in essence, we're going to talk about what we as employers and those who are not necessarily the exact employer, but those who make decisions can do to make sure that we cover our butts in these situations to make sure that an employee under us isn't wrongfully discharged. You did note a few episodes ago about what we should do in terms of performance. And I believe that episode is archived and is called "You're Fired." If our listeners are wanting to check that one out, but you also came across a source, Managerial Law by Philip Perry, and you wanted to share some information on that.
That's right, and really a couple of these are easy, right? We know that we have this doctrine of employment at will, so employees can leave at any time, employer can fire you at any time. Clearly, they can't do that if it's going to breach a contract. If you have a contract, they can't just say, yeah, we're tired of you, go. Or if they're breaking the law. If they're discriminating against you based on your protected characteristics as protected by the Civil Rights Act and other laws, if they're retaliating against you because of some action that you took within your rights, or if they are making your employment contingent on taking a polygraph. Most industries, you're not required to take a polygraph if the employer asks you, and they can't say we're going to fire you over it. So those ones are easy ones, but there's other ways that you might potentially be setting yourself up for a wrongful discharge or wrongful termination situation. And one of those is what we might call an implied contract.
Yeah.
So tell us about implied contracts.
So in an implied contract, we've got you certainly got your written contract, right? Your handbook, any other formal literature from the organization, but then we've got these oral contracts that we tend to make, such as and it can even be in passing, such as if I said, Shu, I think you're going to be good here for a long time,
right?
I have just now implied that you have employment for, I don't know how you quantify a long time, but I've just now given you an oral contract.
And assuming you have the authority to do that, I might say, well, Russell's my boss, and he said he wants me to be here for a long time, and then next week I'm up for termination. That's a problem.
Right. And I think that's a very easy one for us to kind of fall into, because we're just chit-chatting at the water cooler, so to speak.
Right.
And I tell you everything's great, and I think you're going to be a good candidate here for a long time, and now I have set myself up for potential litigation.
Right. And something else you mentioned, if you have an employee handbook, that's not necessarily a legal contract with the employee, but if the language in it says, you must receive 2 written warnings before you can be up for termination or suspension, or, we will follow this particular disciplinary path for any infraction. If you don't follow that path, you've basically breached a contract with your employee that you're going to give them this many chances before they're up for termination.
Exactly. And that's, like you said, it may not be the strongest of legal documents, but it is a pretty good way to be attacked.
Absolutely.
To show that handbook and say, listen, I was supposed to get 2 strikes and I got nothing.
And you got no strikes. That's
right.
That's not a good way to play baseball.
Now, talk to me about this creating an intolerable working situation. What Perry described as constructive discharge.
Yeah, so constructive discharge is this concept that if the employer doesn't want you there, they're going to make the work situation so intolerable that you're just not going to want to work there anymore. They're going to make the conditions bad. They're going to give you the bad shifts. They're going to take away your resources. You might even get harassed directly or indirectly. And they're really just, hoping to push you out. They're not going to fire you, but they're going to say, well, maybe he'll quit or she'll quit if we keep being mean to him or her.
Now, isn't this sort of what happened in the cult classic Office Space?
Yes, exactly right. That was kind of what they did to Milton, right? If you remember that movie, I think they said at one point Milton actually had been laid off years ago, and just they forgot to tell him.
Right.
And so if they just stopped paying him, then he would just leave on his own accord, and they didn't have to say anything to him. But that's really not a good way to do business.
Right.
Yes, great point. So that's something that it could be hard to prove because, if the manager keeps giving you duties you don't like or shifts you don't like, maybe that's just the luck of the draw.
Right.
You're going to have a hard time bringing conclusive evidence to say, hey, this is happening to me and nobody else, and it's because they don't like me and they want me to go.
Right, and I was sharing an anecdote with you before we started recording, sort of in our industry, in the faculty world, where I've heard stories of, say the old tenured faculty who doesn't do anything and won't retire. They don't want to fire him or her.
Right.
So they give them the teaching slots at like 9:00 at night every night of the week, hoping to push them out.
They get the Sunday afternoon classes.
You got it. You got it.
Absolutely. So another issue might be if you're asking an employee to violate public policy. If you say, hey, I want you to do something that's in violation of the law, not that I'm discriminating against you necessarily, but I want you to discriminate against somebody else, or I want you to break some law, whether you're doing something with an ethics law or you're covering something up, and you say, no, I'm not going to do that, they say, okay, you're fired. Now, they have just created a wrongful termination situation for themselves because they can't make you do something that's against the law.
Exactly. And I think another thing that I found interesting is you shared your notes with me yesterday before we started recording is this idea of good faith and fair dealing. Talk to me about that. Right before you're about to be vested or tenured or whatever language your industry uses.
Right, and that the whole covenant of good faith and fair dealing is a little bit complex and it's a little bit hard to prove. But the idea is the employer is supposed to try to treat you right. They hired you because they wanted you to do work. If you're doing good work, they should be doing the right thing by you. And if the employer says, hey, you know what, we could save some money, you're about ready to come up on your vesting, you're going to start getting matches in your 401k, or you're going to come up on when you'll be eligible for pension, or you're going to come up on something that we don't necessarily want to give you, or it's going to cost us money, we're going to have to let you go. That's not a legitimate reason to let somebody go.
Now, Shu, not to put you on the spot, but one thing I've heard of happening is when this is beginning to creep up, when this vesting period or this, like you said, a 401k options are about to start coming up, and they tell the person, you're no longer an employee of XYZ Corporation. Now you're an independent contractor, which means now you work for yourself and you just happen to sign up to work for XYZ Corporation. Does that violate this?
For sure, because, you've created, you've told the person that they're an independent contractor, first of all. As an independent contractor, you would have to enter into a separate employment agreement with the employer or the I guess the client in this case.
Okay.
So if they say, we don't want you to work for us anymore, that's fine. As long as they're not creating a wrongful termination situation. Right. But they can't say, well, we're changing your status over from, full-time employee to independent contractor.
Okay.
It would be your choice to decide whether you're going to still work with them or not, and you're going to have to negotiate a new contract and negotiate, are you going to still get benefits? Are you going to get a certain level of pay? Or whatever.
Okay.
They can't just say, let's snap our fingers and make that happen.
Gotcha.
They can try to, but they shouldn't.
Gotcha.
And then the last thing is, a lot of times what happens, sometimes related to all of these things, is if the employer uses what we call pretext. And the legal term pretext basically means they're making up some excuse to terminate you, and it's not necessarily true, and it's just really covering up for one of these illegal reasons we've talked about. Oh, well, Russell's not a team player, and so we don't really want to keep him around anymore, when really they just want to push you out.
Right.
And there's not really any evidence to support the fact that you're not a team player.
Gotcha.
Or that you came in late or whatever. Right.
Okay.
And that's something that you can show in a court of law and say, look, there's no evidence of what they're claiming. This is just pretext. They're just trying to push me out and don't have a good reason for it.
Gotcha.
So what do you think Dr. Fairmont would tell us if he were here and not showing that prize bull?
And I hope he's just showing it and not riding that bull.
Moo.
If he were here, I think, first of all, he would give us the caveat, that if somebody is not performing, they've got to go.
That's it. And don't be afraid to let somebody go if they're not doing the job for you.
Right.
But
that said, I think Dr. Fairmont would say, first of all, document performance.
Definitely.
Keep that paper trail, whether it's hard paper or whether it's a digital paper trail. Document that performance, like you said, so that we avoid that last point you just gave us about pretext.
Absolutely.
So that we, if Joe or Sue is coming in late every day, document that.
Sure,
so
it should
that it's
be
not
easy.
so that it's not hearsay.
Yeah, it should be easy to do that, right?
I think Dr. Fairmont would also tell us to follow company policy. And that kind of goes back to what we talked about with the handbook, with other formal documents in the company. If it says they get 2 strikes or 3 strikes, if it says they get X penalty for Y offense, then abide by that.
Do that for everybody.
For everybody, not just for one person, but for everybody.
Right.
And then I think following along what you mentioned earlier, I think Dr. Fairmont would say, don't break the law.
Yeah, that's good advice.
That is really good advice, especially in 2017 in a lawsuit-happy climate that we live in.
That's for sure. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone listening, and ultimately, I think the important thing is just treat your employees fairly. They're not going to ask you, and they might ask you. You don't have to give them more than they deserve, but at least give them the treatment they deserve. And they're not going to bring all these suits against you if you document, if you follow the law, if you treat them well. We're going to sign off right now, and we're going to talk about our next podcast in a little bit, which will be lifelong learning, I think is the topic. We're excited about that. If you're a listener and you have a topic for us, feel free to contact us through SoundCloud or iTunes and let us know what you'd like us to talk about. And thank you to St. Louis University, the Donald R. Tapia School of Business. Our intro and outro music is provided by bensounds.com. And, of course, we want to thank our engineer and researcher, Sean the Soundman Gibbons. Yes. And all the way, folks, if you see Dr. Fairmont at the fair, tell him we're looking for him.